Oh, we got a bit of a different one today. This is going to be the start of a three-parter, I believe. We're taking a deep dive look into Scars of Mirrodin block. So, Mirrodin block was the first examination of the plane. It included Mirrodin, Darksteel, and Fifth Dawn. Had its own story arc, but it was exploration of a whole new plane that was based around artifacts, and was quite exciting. Scars Mirrodin block took a darker turn for it, but it was still started out with the same familiar plane to a large degree, and we built from there. So, what else? Scars Mirrodin block incorporates over time more and more the Phyrexians. So, what were the Phyrexians understood to be at the time that this set started? Because by the time we get to the end of it, it's not only going to be big changes for Mirrodin, it's also going to be fair changes to the Phyrexians. The Phyrexians before this point looked rather different for those of you who were around back then. There have been lots of novels and things written to try to unpack and clarify the history, and they don't always line up perfectly. Welcome, Jane. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to start with a little brief overview of some of the key players moving into the block before we dive into Scars of Mirrodin and see the reintroduction of one of my favorite planes, or at least one of the ones that was very impactful. Artifact-centric sets were always had a lot of potential and frequently went awry because they made them a little bit too strong for their own good sometimes. So let's flip this around, if I can remember how. And let's see, what were the Phyrexians understood to be when they were first introduced? Now, Alpha Beta Unlimited was very sort of generic fantasy. They introduced a few keyword concepts and people. You had Sarah, it was a recurring theme, Lawnmower, all these different sort of elements there. But there wasn't really a grand story starting to form there. Arabian Nights was drawing from outside content, so it didn't do a whole lot either. It wasn't until Antiquities they really started to make their own story. So in Antiquities, there are a lot of artifact creatures, but they don't typically mention the Phyrexians much at that point. The Phyrexia and Yawgmoth, you have Priest of Yawgmoth here, and the text is entirely made up of what it does. So it's a 2-mana, 1/2, tap to add amount of black mana equal to target artifact's casting cost to your mana pool. And then the artifact, which must belong to you, is discarded. So you're sacrificing an artifact to add amount of black equal to its casting cost, basically. This would be much shorter formatting currently, but they're still working that stuff out. If this was printed today, it would have room for flavor text. Didn't then. The other reference to Yawgmoth is on Yawgmoth's Demon. I've got a Chronicles version, and it's a 6/6 for 6, which at the time was very strong stats. Flying for a strike. This thing was brutal if you got it into play in the skies. Honestly, being a 6/6 with first strike around this era being Antiquities, you had almost free reign of the skies. Anything else that flew was the best creatures were like 4/4s, Sarah Angel, Singir Vampire, Air Elemental, stuff like that, or 5/5 Shivan Dragon, 5/6 Mahamati Djinn. All those would go down to this thing before they could even strike back. If you had a Lord of the Pit, another big demon, that was a 7/7 Flying Trample, that could take this. Another set, when Legends came out, the Elder Dragons were big enough to take this guy. Or maybe a Nightmare if you had enough swamps in play. But basically that was it. There wasn't much that could challenge this thing in the skies. But nasty upkeep. During your upkeep, sacrifice an artifact. You got to keep feeding the Yawgmoth demon artifacts. And if you don't, not only does it deal 2 damage to you, not as much as Lord of the Pit, but it also taps, so you can't use it. So that's frustrating. Anyway, but again, no flavor text. And those were the only 2 mentions of Yawgmoth. Was the Priest of Yawgmoth and Yawgmoth Demon. Yawgmoth becomes a big character in Phyrexia lore later. The references to Phyrexia itself, we have Phyrexian Gremlins. This is a 1/1 for 3. Tap the Gremlins to tap an artifact. As long as Gremlins remains tapped and in play, that artifact does not untap as normal during controller's untap phase. You may choose not to untap Gremlins during your untap phase. So this was to lock down artifacts. Black still has trouble with artifacts to this day. They never really gave it a whole lot better tools for dealing with artifacts. There was Curse Artifact and things like that a little bit later, but again, locking things down isn't always going to solve your problem. And the Phyrexian Gremlins, cute little guys in a way, are easily dealt with. But that's what we had. We had this, and we also had Gate to Phyrexia. Still, perhaps the best way the black has to deal with artifacts. An enchantment for 2 black. Sacrifice one of your creatures during your upkeep to destroy any 1 artifact. So yeah. Fairly straightforward, repeatable, permanent. And this one is, of the 4 that mention Yawgmoth and Phyrexia, the only one with enough space at the time to have flavor text. So the warm rain of grease on my face immediately made it clear I had entered Phyrexia. So Phyrexia was a place. And Greece, obviously tied to black, and having something to do with artifacts. Mostly impeding artifacts at this stage, interestingly. Also like to be fed artifacts for the Yawgmoth cards. So, set these aside. And on into a little later on, in alliances, you have Phyrexian Boon. As long as enchanted creature is black, it gets +2/+1, otherwise it gets -1/-2. So this could buff one of your creatures or be removal or crippling to one of your opponent's creatures. Dagson should have paid attention to the lessons of Phyrexia before attempting to create a mechanical utopia. So again, the reference to mechanical things. And this time, enhancing or crippling creatures. You also had, in alliances, the Phyrexian Warbeasts. Deal with the spawn of Phyrexia cautiously. Only with time may we control them, said Dagson. Knowing its origins, how could they have thought they could control it? Said Saurine Relicbane. And these are the first sort of combat creatures that, of many. There are lots of Phyrexian beasts that come out later of various descriptions. You've also got Phyrexian Rager. You've got all kinds of little guys, some bigger guys. You see that in Cold Snap as well. After alliances, that sort of kept the theme going as to what Phyrexia was. And Phyrexia became a bigger challenge as time went on. When they got to their next big artifact block, Urza's Saga, you had Urza dealing with Yawgmoth more directly. And Yawgmoth, the connections became clear. Yawgmoth was definitely a leader in Phyrexia. You got cards like Yawgmoth's Will and Yawgmoth's Bargain that came out. Still very well-known cards to this day. Here's a early version of Corrupt. Yawgmoth brushed Urza's mind, and Urza's world convulsed. So, oh, one more thing I forgot to mention earlier. How long did it take to learn how to play the game? Well, playing the game is a process. Back when I started, there were less rules, less card types. The game has expanded a bit since then, so it's a bit more complicated than it was. But it really isn't that hard a game to learn the basics. You can play a land each turn. You use your lands to play your other cards. You go back and forth trying to defeat your opponent. That's not really what I'm doing in this time. No, we're looking at the history and development of one particular block, which came, about 15 years ago, so about halfway through the life of the game. I'm just giving a bit of the background for it right now. But one thing I had forgotten to mention, I'll just grab this from back here. Not only, whoops, bump to the camera. Did you have the War Beasts? Here's a bigger Phyrexian Devourer. So it was another power, if it's power 7 or greater, bury it. But it's a much bigger beastie. Remove the top card of your library from the game and put X counter on Phyrexian Devourer, where X is equal to that card's casting cost. So started small but could grow. And Phyrexians, a lot of them, you see it with Yawgmoth's Will, Yawgmoth's Bargain. They can be about drawing cards for life. They can be about manipulating the graveyard. They can be about power. Getting more cards, giving up more cards. Here's Phyrexian Portal. So again, another gate to Phyrexia idea that Phyrexia is a place and it can give you some benefits, but there's drawbacks. So it's an artifact for 3, pay 3. Your opponent looks at the top 10 cards of your library and separates them into 2 face-down piles. Choose one of those piles and remove it from the game. Nowadays that would be exile it. Search your remaining pile, put one of those cards into your hand, and shuffle the remaining cards into your library. So, again, a way to draw cards more easily than a Jumonde Tome could at the time. However, with the steep drawback of removing chunks of cards from your library and wearing yourself down in that sense quite quickly. So you had big creatures stomping around that were Phyrexian, mechanical creatures, as well as these sort of portal cards. And the idea of what Phyrexia was still largely hidden, but the hints were there. And anyway, Urza's block. So, after that brush, we have here's a well-known card, Stroke of Genius. Popular in certain decks at the time. Tolarian Academy could make this thing go nuts. You could make your opponent draw out their entire deck with some quick artifact mana. And look at the sketch in the background there. Who's that? We'll get to him in a second. So after 100 failed experiments, Urza was stunned to find that common silver passed through the portal undamaged. He immediately designed a golem made of the metal. So dealing with these portals to Phyrexia and things, things got corrupted, things got damaged, but he thought he had found a way to be able to explore, interact in a safer manner by using silver. And he made this doesn't want to cooperate. Karn, the silver golem. There's from the picture there. Karn is a pacifist. If you get an early copy of Pacify from Tempest, I believe, you'll see it features Karn dealing with a lot of unruly rabble around him. So Karn here, legendary artifact creature, 5 cost, 4/4. When Karn Silver Golem blocks or becomes blocked, it gets -4, +4 until end of turn, so it becomes a 0/8. And you can pay 1. Target non-creature artifact is an artifact creature with power and toughness, each equal to its casting cost until end of turn. So it could make your other artifacts into creatures. So it could turn your artifacts that weren't creatures, your metallic objects basically, into living things, which is rather interesting. Quite powerful. I actually had a Elder Dragon Highlander deck back in the day, built around Karn Silver Golem, when that was quite difficult because all that existed that was colorless, you had very few lands that didn't tap for any color or have any colored symbols on them to create your mana base. Waste didn't exist, so that wasn't an option. There was no non-basics, in other words, or basic lands for colorless, in other words, and you basically just had artifacts to play once you had your lands. So it was a challenging little deck building experience for myself. But Karn is quite a character, one I've always enjoyed. And the story went on. Karn eventually joined up with the Legacy crew. And after Urza's block, a little while, we got the Invasion block. And this had to do with the Phyrexian invasion into Dominaria. And this was fought back over time. Phyrexians became more cunning. So you got cards like Phyrexian Infiltrator here, 2/2 for 3, and you could pay 4 to exchange control of Phyrexian Infiltrator and target creature. So yeah, different nasties. And Urza teaming up with Teferi here. Disrupt. Counter target instant or sorcery unless the controller pays 1 draw card. Teferi wanted no part of Urza's battle plans, but both agreed the Phyrexian portal must be closed. So you got a little bit of cooperation, grudgingly, between these guys here. And the invasion arc is another whole thing, which we're not going to get into today. But, like I said, it spawned a whole block, lots of stories, lots of characters and development on what Phyrexia was, and the battle with the Weatherlight, the Legacy, all these wonderful creations. And this gets into the creation of Mirrodin. We had the infamous artifact lands, which we'll take a look at some of the other ones here in a minute. Here's the Darksteel Citadel from Darksteel. Adds a colorless and is indestructible. And you can see sort of the metallic shimmer of the plane there. And eventually, through the War of Invasion, you have the end of Yawgmoth. Yawgmoth's corpse is a wound in the universe. His foul blood seeps out, infecting the land with his final curse. And this was 2007, back in the Time Spiral block. Eventually, Yawgmoth was defeated. And he had various other minions working with him. Gix was another one. You see, Priest of Gix and Claw of Gix and other cards. But lots of that in that early period. But that iteration of the Phyrexians were defeated, or so they thought. And Karn went on to build the plane of Mirrodin. And it was a mechanical wonder. So here we have some more of the artifact lands. I'll pull them all out here so we can take a closer look. This one's from the Dual Decks version, but same art. So the Tree of Tales, Tel'Jalad Sanctum of the Ancient Trolls, Keepers of the Secrets of Mirrodin's Origin. Koldutha, Wellspring of Molten Metal, Temple of the Goblin Horde. Lumen Grid, Site of the Knowledge Pool, Source of the Vedekan Arcana. Ishsha, Den of the Warlord Geth, Commander of Countless Nim. The Nim were basically zombies. And the Ancient Den, Tajnar, Throne of Raksha, Golden Cub, destined leader of the Leonin Prides. Hope you feel better soon. I've had a cough. Also, weather warm one day, cold the next doesn't help. Yeah. Well, Mama Spokat is still feeling pretty under the weather. I've been improving. My voice is not quite perfect yet, but it's a lot better than what she was doing. And I've been preparing for this for a while, so I'm glad to share finally with some of this. Now, the basic lands for Scars of Mirrodin, since they're right here, this will make a nice little transition. You can see they kept a lot of the same appearance here to begin with. You got Vault of Whispers, and you can see it in the background here of this swamp. So they kept these in the background here. The Ancient Den, you can only see it basically in silhouette up here, but if you follow the trace of these shoulders here, and then it goes up off the top, that's the Ancient Den there. Here you can see the seat of the Synod from a slightly different lower angle. Still there. And they've built in this one's very much the broad scenic scape where the art continues from one land to the next through all four images. I always appreciate it when they do that. Here for the Tree of Tales, or over in this one over here, to find this one in the background there. You can see the little opening at the top here, and it's visible up there. Bring this closer. If I can get it to focus without having to take it out would be better. See the opening at the top for the Tree of Tales. And red. The Great Furnace is again visible back in the arts here. Or was it? Or was it this one over here? Anyway. Yeah, I think that each one, it's the one with the sun more visible. So the Great Furnace. Anyhow. This wonderful world created, as it turns out, by Karn. Karn, having traveled through this portal, unfortunately had some taint of Phyrexia with him, and when he created this world and it had its wonders start, this Phyrexia had been defeated, but elements remained and started to develop over long ages. Well, not that long, but long enough in this new place. So we'll start with white. And Abuna Alcote. 1/1 for 2. The Cat Cleric. You can break nothing I cannot mend. Tap to prevent the next 1 damage that would be dealt to target creature or player this turn, or tap to prevent the next 2 damage that would be dealt to an artifact creature this turn. So again, very artifact focused. The entire block, most of these blocks were all sorts of interactions you'll see there. Arrest. This one's been reprinted a couple of times. Enchanted creature can't attack or block. Its activated abilities can't be activated. Blade hold houses a rogue's gallery filled with living statues of the worst enemies of the Auroch. Next, we've got the Auroch Edgewright. See, this is why I like these binders over here better with the pages. I can pull out the page and shift the page more easily than having to pull things out one at a time with this, or hover the camera awkwardly over each thing here. I'm going to have to figure out how the best way to do it with this binder is. Metalcraft 2/2. Auriok Edgerite has double strike as long as you control 3 or more artifacts. Now, in the original Mirrodin block that had affinity for artifacts, that was proved to be very, very powerful. Metalcraft is a slightly toned down version, a little bit more balanced, and still quite evocative and gives some strong abilities. Auriok soldiers craft their own weapons, forging a connection to the steel with each blow of the hammer. Now you'll notice on each of these cards we've seen so far, there's a little emblem in the bottom box, a circle, and at the top, 5 lines cutting out from the center out to the edge. So this is the Mirrodin symbol. Thanks for joining us, Gene. And this, all the factions of the people who are loyal to the plane, whatever tribe they were in, they feature that Mirrodin symbol. The Phyrexians, there aren't a lot of them in Scars of Mirrodin, but they start to show up. And as the block goes on, they gain more influence and more representation. Auriok Sunchaser. Grant me loft, grant me light, grant me accuracy. I need to kill all who threaten Bladehold. Prayer to the White Sun. Now, again, if you played the other ones, especially Fifth Dawn, you had the White Sun Zenith. Sorry, no, I'm getting this mixed up. Bringer of the Blue Dawn, Bringer of the Black Dawn, Bringer of the Green Dawn. All these bringers were strong creatures that could be cast for 1 mana of each color. It was interesting. So these Auriok human soldiers, Metalcraft, as long as you control 3 or more artifacts, it gets +2/+2 and has flying. So again, if you've got the artifacts kicking around, 2 mana for a 1/1 is pretty not great. But if you've got the artifacts going, 2 mana for a 3/3 flying is much more impressive. It does take a bit of setup, though. And we've got a Dispense Justice. The Accorders never strike first, but they always strike back. Target player sacrifices an attacking creature. Metalcraft. That player sacrifices 2 attacking creatures instead. So a little bit of a defensive removal spell. Then we've got Elspeth Tyrael. This was not the first Elspeth card ever made by a long shot, but it is an early one. And not the strongest. But Elspeth was active on the plane of Mirrodin, helping them defend, identify the threat, and adapt early on. Part of the story. And the stories were definitely more developed by this time than they were in the early sets, where there were just a lot of hints in flavor text. So it's a Planeswalker card, which were introduced in Lorwyn a few years before this. Planeswalkers didn't exist yet in the first Mirrodin block. Not as a card type for the game. So it's got +2, you gain 1 life for each creature you control. -2, put 3 1/1 white soldier creature tokens onto the battlefield. Or -5, destroy all other permanents except for lands and tokens. So it could build up a bit of an army for you and defend itself somewhat. But at a 5 cost, that's not the most impactful of Planeswalkers by a long shot. I much prefer the 4 cost version of Elspeth that was around at the time. Fulgent Distraction. Choose 2 target creatures, tap those creatures, then unattach all equipment from them. Equipment was first introduced back in Mirrodin block. first Mirrodin block, right around the same time that they switched to the modern card frame, I guess you'd call it. Got rid of the old classic one. And there have been changes to this over the years too, which we'll see an example of as we go here. Channeling the white-hot power of all 5 suns creates a pretty good diversion. Then we've got Galmo's Warden, 2/4 for 4. Elephant Soldier with Metalcraft. It gets +2/+2. Special unit guards. A special unit guards the Loxton Artificer known as Galma the Shaper. They are armed and armored in her finest works of silver and steel. So there's that. Next we have Glimmerpoint Stag. 3/3 for 4, Vigilance. When Glimmerpoint Stag enters the battlefield, exile another target permanent. Return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So it gets to blink something. And it's a 3/3 Vigilance for 4. Not that exciting, and it's a slow blink. It's not immediately returned. It's a little later. This one saw some very important builds in some aggressive decks. The Glint Hawk. 2/2 flyer for 1 white. When Glint Hawk enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless you return an artifact you control to its owner's hand. So any 0-cost artifact would enable this on your first turn. You drop your 0-cost, bounce it with this, bring it out, then bring back your other. This could be very nice in aggressive white builds, of which there were a couple. Its eyes burned, nearly blind by the white sun. It hunts by metallic gleam. Next, we've got an Indomitable Archangel. 4-cost, 4/4 flyer. Metalcraft artifacts you control have Shroud as long as you control 3 or more artifacts. So once you get those artifacts, she helps protect them. Every sword drawn to defend is an angelic blade, guided to justice by an angelic hand. Then we've got Kemba, the Ka Regent. 2/4 for 3 was pretty good stats at the time. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a 2/2 white cat creature token onto the battlefield for each equipment attached to Kemba. This was a neat little build around. If you wanted to build a Voltron deck type thing, so I believe what they call them now, where you just put a bunch of equipment in and you'd use this as your commander, this would make its own army to fight alongside. So there are probably a lot better options now, but this was an evocative little piece of design, and even in equipment-heavy decks, you could get some value out of this. I am not Raksha. I will never be, but I refuse to be the Ka who watched her pride be torn asunder. So again, showing a little bit of the history of the plane there with this new generation of defenders. Next, we've got Kemba's Skyguard, 2/2 flyer for 3. When Kemba's Skyguard enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life. So good. Again, enter effects weren't as popular back then, but there's still a few. It was becoming more and more of a thing. We're now to dispense aid to any Mirren we see battling anything strange. Regent's orders. So they're starting to notice something's amiss, and there are some weird things about. There's a Leonin Arbiter. 2/2 for 2. Players can't search libraries. Any player must pay 2 for that player to ignore this effect until end of turn. So this could gum up your opponent's fetch lands. This could gum up any other sort of tutor effect too. Our people are torn by infighting. Until the two sides reconcile, our laws can carry no meaning. Here's the first sample of a foil I've got. So you can see that symbol there really glints nicely on these foils from this block, this set in particular. Luxton Wayfarer. Just to compare, they do look nice, these foils. So 3 mana for a 1/5 Elephant Monk. Pretty vanilla, but, you know, it's a body, it's a defender. The Mirrodin Elders vanished with Memnarch, leaving behind a generation of wayward orphans. Maybe I should have thrown Memnarch into our remembrance of what came before, because Memnarch was a big deal during the first Mirrodin block. Next we got Mirrorsmith. 2/1 for 2. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may pay 1. If you do, put a 1/1 colorless mirror artifact token onto the battlefield. So this was a way to get more extra value. The Aurochs see the Artificer as a conduit, beckoning new creations into the world. Next, we have a Razorfin Hippogriff. 3/3 flyer for 5. When it enters the battlefield, return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. You gain life equal to that card's converted mana cost, so you gain a little life and get a card back. She incubates her eggs in gold and mana. For those who are Hippogriff fans, there's one. I first came across Hippogriffs actually in the tabletop game Warhammer fantasy version. Long before, I think these days most people come across them in Harry Potter. Anyway, Revoke Existence. Sorcery for 2. Exile target artifact or enchantment. Not instant speed like good old Disenchant, but a little more permanent than Disenchant typically. No half measures, no regrets. We'll tell no stories of this day. It will be as if it never existed at all. So as you can see, we're more than halfway through white now, and we still haven't come across a single Phyrexian card. There's reasons for that, and we'll get to that shortly. Salvage Scout, 1/1 for 1. Sacrifice Salvage Scout, return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. I'm not saying it's dangerous work. I'm just saying don't sign up if you have plans for your 70th birthday. Seize the initiative. And again, these cat warrior tribes, very big here. The time between spotting a Leonin, Shikari, and feeling its claws is just time enough to draw your last breath. So 1 white darker creature gets +1/+1 on first strike until end of turn. Neat little combat trick. Next, we've got Soul Parry. Prevent all damage to 1 or 2 target creatures. Prevent all damage 1 or 2 target creatures would deal this turn. Sorry, you're not preventing 2, you're stopping individuals from dealing damage. I was called to this world of steel, and it will be my steel that answers. From Elspeth. Sunblast Angel. 4/5 for 6, flying. When it enters the battlefield, destroy all tapped creatures. So, obviously, you get your turn, you untap your stuff. If your opponent has been attacking you, their stuff is likely to be largely tapped. There may exist powers even greater than Phyrexia. So they were noticing not only something strange, but starting to get the clue that this had to do with Phyrexia. Sunspear Shikari. 2/2 for 2. As long as Sunspear Shikari is equipped, it has first strike and lifelink. There's a few of these creatures that got bonuses for being equipped. Left without their leader, Rashka, the Leonins split into 2 prides. One side supported the Regent Ka, while the other rebelled in fury. And this is one that I built a deck around. Artifact creatures you control get +2/+2 enchantment for 3 tempered steel. Death shall prevail as long as our will falls to rust. May necessity anneal our resolve. Then we've got True Conviction. Enchantment for 6. Creatures you control have double strike and lifelink. Nice little buff, but man, is that expensive. I still haven't found adequate ways to really trick out enchantments early in my, to my liking anyway. Dozens of spells known only to the Auric Elders were lost. But the next generation, galvanized by war, devised even more potent magic. Then we've got Vigil for the Lost. Enchantment for 4. Whenever a creature you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you may pay X. If you do, you gain X life. So again, enchantments that don't do something immediately when they come into play and cost a fair bit, especially, they're really hard sells these days. And this one, even when you do get it out, then you have to have something else happen and pay more mana, and the goal here is to gain more life. Gaining life is a weaker effect than many, and the amount of steps you have to jump through, this card I don't remember ever seeing play. She grew cold in my arms. I swore an oath that her funeral pyre would be dwarfed by a bonfire of our enemies. And our last white card here is White Sun's Passage. You gain 5 life at instant speed for 2. Again, these sorts of effects were never great. Healing Salve back in the day was a little bit better because you could use it to prevent damage as well as gaining life. So you could at least save a creature with it in the right circumstance. But yeah, all over the Razor Fields, White Sun is celebrated. Even the followers of the rebels, Jurian, far from the cave of light, bow their heads in reverence. This is not cooperating. There we go. Now, on to blue. So blue, we got the Argent Sphinx. Again, Mirrodin. 4/3 for 4. Flying Metalcraft. Pay a blue, exile Argent Sphinx. Return it to the battlefield under your control at the beginning of the next end step. Activate this ability only if you control 3 or more artifacts. So you can blink it out if it's about to die and keep it alive. Another Mirrodin spell. Bonds of Quicksilver. Enchantment for 3 flash. Enchant creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. So if you can catch a creature when it's tapped, you can lock it out. Unless they've got some other means to either remove the enchantment or untap it. The sea's reach extends beyond its shores. The seas on this planet, Quicksilver is another word for mercury, so it was liquid metal seas. Very interesting place. The razor fields were mentioned for white. Here's our first Phyrexian card. On the bottom here, an uncommon 2/4 for 4 flying. When Dark Slick Drake is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, draw a card. At the edge of the Mephidros, Phyrexia's influence seeps into life and land. So the Mephidros is this interesting area that seems to be turning up and affecting things. Disperse. So blue and 1. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Most casualties of the power struggle between the Vidican and the Nurok didn't die on the field of battle. They merely disappeared. So you can see there's these contentions between the different groups, the different factions, which opened up an opportunity for Phyrexia to spread early on. Dissipation Field. Enchantment. Whenever a permanent deals damage to you, return it to its owner's hand. An annoying way to slow things down, but I don't think it ultimately had a big enough impact. You could work around it enough. Strike me once, shame on you. Strike me twice? Well, let's just see if you can. Flavor text was always one of my favorite parts of Magic cards, right from the beginning and when I started playing. Sadly, as sets have gone on, there seems to be less of it. Other blue creatures you control. Grand Architect. 1/3 for 3. Other blue creatures you control get +1/+1. Pay 1. Target artifact creature becomes blue until end of turn. Tap an untapped blue creature you control. Add 2 to your mana pool. Spend this mana only to cast artifact spells or activated abilities of artifacts. You can see the ink there's got a little weak on the corner, which is interesting on this one. Excuse me. Next, we have a halt order. Instant. Counter target artifact spell. Draw a card for 3. An artificer's least favorite mind missive may be, I regret to inform you that the funding for your project has been cut. Now here, this is a newer reprint. I have a couple of these. I just couldn't come across the version I needed, so I found this one to fill in the gap. Same art, same flavor text, just the different border, and you can see here the difference primarily down at the bottom. Whereas this was blue all the way around, they've now rounded and given more black for reading the card numbers and dates and artist names and all that. Does that make it much clearer? I don't know. In some things, I think yes. In some things, I don't know. I don't think it's a huge upgrade myself. It also gives them the spot to put their little hollow symbol for the rares and up for a security measure. Enchantment for 5. Whenever you cast a spell, proliferate. And proliferate was a fairly strong mechanic, really. You choose any number of permanents and or players with counters on them, then give each another counter of a kind they are already there. See how gratefully this world accepts our blessings, Jin-Gitaxias Core Augur. So this, again, had it been from the main set, would have had a Phyrexian icon on it. You can see the Phyrexian ink spilling into the Mephidros Sea there. The Quicksilver Sea. Lumen Grid Drake. So 4-cost 2/2 flying metalcraft. It enters the battlefield. If you control 3 or more artifacts, return target creature to its owner's hand. So basically, it's a mana war, but it flies and it costs 1 more. Properly outfitted drakes made perfect sentries for Vatican strongholds. Next, we've got a Nurok Invisimancer. 2/1 for 3. It's unblockable. And when it enters the battlefield, target creature is unblockable this turn. They won't see your shadow or hear your breath, but they will feel your blade. Then we've got Plated Strider. A 2-cost 1/4. Sort of a throwback to the old Dan Dan, which was a 4/1 for 2 blue. But this doesn't have the island requirements, and a 4/1 is just a more defensive rated creature by far. The Nurok buried entangled cables just under the Quicksilver Sea. 1 Sea Strider's harvest can provide an army's worth of armor and shields. And next, another one of the mythics. Quicksilver Gargantuan. 7 cost, 7/7. You may have Quicksilver Gargantuan enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it's still 7/7. You know you have achieved true power if the sea itself seeks to emulate your greatness. Next, we have the Riddlesmith. 2/1 for 2. Human Artificer. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. The Nurok see the Artificer as an archaeologist, clearing away falsehoods to see the truth hidden beneath. It's a fun little card with the right setup. Could get some value out of it. Scrap Driver Serpent. 7 cost, 5/5. Scrap Driver Serpent is unblockable as long as defending player controls an artifact. Smart artificers clean up after themselves. Again, a common, and in a set with so many artifacts, a little more reliable than the old Sea Serpent was, even if it costs 1 more. Screeching Silklaw. 2 for a 1/2 flying metalcraft. When it deals combat damage to a player, if you control 3 or more artifacts, that player puts the top 4 cards of his or her library into their graveyard. It's adaptively deaf to its own cries. Then we've got Shape Anew. 4-cost sorcery. Controller of target artifact sacrifices it, then reveals cards from the top of his or her library until he or she reveals an artifact card. That player puts that card onto the battlefield, then shuffles all other cards revealed this way into his or her library. Next Next, we have a Sky Eel School. 3/3 for 5, flying. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card, then discard a card. They swim on tides few can see, away from a threat few yet understand. Then we've got Steady Progress. This poor fellow. 2 and a blue, so 3 for an instant. Proliferate and draw a card. More of that strange oil. It's probably nothing. And that oil was a sign. Now, you'll notice, speaking of oil, all the way back to Gate of Phyrexia, there was a connection with oil. The warm rain of grease on my face immediately made it clear I had entered Phyrexia. They use the term grease, which is honestly just a thicker form of oil. So maybe not as direct as I was remembering, to be frank, but it's interesting to see that that element gained new importance as they moved forward. Yeah, welcome, Grippendorf. Thanks for hopping in. Stoic Rebuttal. Counter target spell for 3. Metalcraft. It costs 1 less to cast if you control 3 or more artifacts. So, either this was a cancel, or if you had 3 artifacts, it became the same as Counterspell in terms of its cost. So it's a nice way to improve on the cancel, which was sort of the standard Counterspell for a long stretch in here. Obsessed with the pursuit of knowledge above all else, Vidicin can appear to be cold and emotionless. And it's a common. Next, we had Thrumming Bird. I used to use these in some of my later Infect decks. We haven't seen a card with Infect yet, but they're coming. 1/1 flying for 2. When Thrumming Bird deals combat damage to a player, proliferate. Then we've got a nice little reprint here from the first Mirrodin set, Trinket Mage. 2/2 for 3. When Trinket Mage enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an artifact card with converted mana cost 1 or less. Reveal that card, put it into your hand. If you do, shuffle your library. So a 2/2 body for 3 is pretty standard at the time, but being able to tutor up a cheap artifact, very handy, especially when you've got things like Sol Ring around, or, well, many other trinkets, to be honest. Turn Aside. 1 blue instant counter target spell that targets a permanent you control. So a very defensive counterspell. It's not my job to ask our leaders about their experiments at the knowledge pool. It's my job to make sure they can continue performing them. Thrumming Bird, by the way, was, I think, the Thrumming Bird, Steady Progress, I think, were the 4th and 5th Phyrexian icon cards in blue. So you can see that depending on the color, Phyrexian stuff was more prevalent in some factions than others. Twisted Image, 1 blue instant. Switch target creature's power and toughness until end of turn. Draw a card. So just a way to mess with things. You could usually get, well, depending on what you're up against, there was a strong possibility to find value out of something like that. True strength is in the mind, for the body, too, is too malleable a form. Politus Vidicin Emissar. And we've got Vault Skyward. End of turn, untap it. The edges of the Quicksilver Sea run dark with the spread of the Mephidros. 2 more aerial passes before I can be sure what I am seeing. Lafarius, Nurok Sky Agent. Vedekan Centrarch. 1/1 for 1. Metalcrafts, tap target artifact, creature, or land. Activate this ability only if you control 3 or more artifacts. So that could be a very handy way to mess with things. An appropriately detailed model is indistinguishable from reality and much easier to control. And finally, for blue here, we've got Volition Reigns. So 6-cost enchantment. Let's see if we can focus here. When Volition Reigns enters the battlefield, if enchanted permanent is tapped, untap it. You control enchanted permanent. So that untap clause could be handy. However, paying 6 for a control magic, which used to cost 4, and yes, they made 5-cost versions or versions with upkeeps or other things before. They tried to make it a little bit worse generally than the original control magic in most cases, but I find this was just a step too far. Glorifying the will is a mistake. It's simply one more force to be mastered. Next, getting into black, and here you'll see even more Phyrexian cards coming out. Black Cleave Goblin. Now the Phyrexians early on, you could see the first Phyrexian cards coming in Antiquities were black. And they had a lot of influence and connection to artifacts. So black and artifact was very much the 2 places where you'd see Phyrexian cards early in the game. So it makes sense that when they show up here on Mirrodin, black is closely connected. Haste and Infect. This is our first Infect card. 4 cost for a 2/1. And in fact, this creature deals damage to creatures in the form of -1/-1 counters, and to players in the form of poison counters. Infect was one of the first times they really did poison in a way that made it playable and made it strong. Previous creatures were things like Pit Scorpion, that was a 1/1, and if it dealt an opponent, they also got a poison counter. At which point you're dealing damage and counters. This dealt poison counters instead of damage, which was allowed them to be much more efficient and not sort of dividing their cause. Generally, their stats seemed better, and when it was dealing damage to creatures, it also permanently shrunk them, basically. This would also prevent regeneration and other side advantages as well. Bitten, save time, amputate now. Lafar, Loxton Surgeon. Next, we've got a Mirrodin card, the Bleak Coven Vampires. So 4/3 for 5.
Is it better with the light on or off?
It doesn't matter. When Bleak Coven Vampires enters the battlefield, if you control 3 or more artifacts, target player loses 4 life and you gain 4 life. As the shadow of the Mephidros spread over the Tangle, the vampire's territory expanded. Taking advantage of the options there for a little while. Still not entirely under Phyrexia's sway, though. Blister Grub. So 2/2 for 3, Swamp Walk. When Blister Grub is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent loses 2 life. The sooner you join Phyrexia, the sooner you'll forget your painful rebirth. Shieldred the Whispering One. Now, that's an interesting quote. This is the first quote we've had from one of the new leaders of Phyrexia that had been starting to form, some more secretly than others, but Shieldred becomes infamous and is still a threat to this day in the Magic universe, as far as I understand it. I haven't followed up with a lot of the later stories too accurately, but I know there's a very powerful card around that still terrorizes tables. Not Shieldred the Whispering One, but Shieldred the Apocalypse. Anyway, next we've got Carnifex Demon. A 6/6 for 6 with flying. Carnifex Demon enters the battlefield with 2 -1/-1 counters on it, so it starts as a 4/4. And you can pay a black and remove one of these counters to put a -1/-1 counter on each other creature. So, again, works nicely with Proliferate if it doesn't kill creatures outright. Every contagion has a host. Next, we've got the Contagious Nim 2/2 zombie for 3, sort of Scathe zombie stats, except it's got Infect, which makes it much more threatening, really. This creature deals damage to creatures in the form of -1/-1 counters and to players in the form of poison counters. I won't be reading that much longer, but another quote from Shieldred. This species has grown to be my preferred receptacle for our divine message. She liked the zombies. And the Nim were plenteous, so that helped. Corrupted Harvester. Horror. 6/3 for 6. Sacrifice a creature to regenerate it and pay a black. Regenerate didn't survive a whole lot much longer past this block. I think this is one of the last blocks that really used Regenerate in a fairly, well, it's pretty rare here too, but a somewhat consistent way. They had been reducing its prevalence for a long time. It used to be on common creatures. Before the blessed assault begins, we must seek specimens that are well adapted to our way of life. And then we've got a Drawshopper. Sacrifice a creature, Drawshopper gains flying until end of turn. 2/1 for 2. Bred in the vicious Mephedros, Drawshoppers learned to eat quickly and escape faster. Incidentally, a lot of these infect creatures from this block were things like insects and rats and snakes, and I found a nice card to go in an infect deck from this era was from back in Time Spiral again. They had Swarmyard. Just a little deck building tip if you're ever building decks in this era. Probably doesn't happen much these days. Exsanguinate. 2 black and X. Each opponent loses X life. You gain life equal to life lost this way. So, it's basically a Siphon Soul that would scale quite nicely. Vampires don't consider patience a virtue, nor gluttony a sin. Somehow that's not surprising to me. Another Phyrexian card. That last one with the vampires was still Mirrodin at this time. Flesh Allergy. 4-cost sorcery has an additional cost to cast Flesh Allergy. Sacrifice a creature. Destroy target creature. Its controller loses life equal to the number of creatures put into all graveyards from the battlefield this turn. Black usually has no shortage of sacrifice outlets. Finding things that give you bonuses when you sacrifice makes it that much better. Here's a Fume Spitter, 1/1 for 1. Sacrifice Fume Spitter, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. Our archers made sport of it as it fumbled its way up the slag ridge. As it collapsed, we thought ourselves safe, but the foul thing carried more than necrogen. Next we have Geth, Lord of the Vault. Legendary creature, zombie. 5/5 for 6. Intimidate. And you can pay a black and X target. Put target artifact or creature card with converted mana cost X from an opponent's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control tapped. Then that player puts the top X cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. Set him up for next time he gets through. Geth can be fun. A 5/5 Intimidate for 6 isn't great, but if you can get him through, it can be quite amusing to take people's stuff. Grasp of Darkness. Target creature gets -4/-4 until end of turn for 2 black as an instant. Isn't bad as a removal spell. It deals with a lot of things quite well. And again, it will stop regenerating creatures. On a world with 5 suns, night is compelled to become an aggressive force. Then we've got Hand of the Praetors. And again, Praetors is the term that for the new leaders of the Phyrexian factions, as it turns out. There's but one for each color, and Shield Red was the first that we've encountered now. But here's again a zombie, 4 cost for a 3/2 infect. Other creatures you control with infect get +1/+1. Whenever you cast a creature spell with infect, target player gets a poison counter. So they don't even have to damage them. You can just play more creatures with infect to give them poison counters. Very nice. I used to use this in my black infect decks on occasion. And here's another one for the Swarm Yard. Ichor Rats. A 2/1 infect for 3. And when Ichor Rats enters the battlefield, each player gets a poison counter. So you do as well, but, you know, unless they also happen to be running a poison strategy of some sort, that's not likely to matter too much. He gets a head start without having to deal combat damage again. So it's a nice addition. Instill Infection. 4 cost, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature and draw a card. The results of our 9th inoculation were the same. The specimen was, of course, euthanized before the contagion could spread. Vatican Research Notes. Trying to come up with an inoculation, a vaccine for the Phyrexian infection. Not having good success. Memoricide. This one, interestingly, is also a Mirrodin card. 4 cost, name a non-land card. Search target player's graveyard, hand, and library for any number of cards with that name and exile them. Then that player shuffles his or her library. So if you know what's going to cause trouble in your opponent's deck, you can just eliminate that particular threat. You claim wisdom, yet I see nothing in here but tawdry wishes. Moriok Reaver, 3/2 for 3. Human Warrior. The Moriok are fools. They try so hard to gain my favor. All I want is for them to die quickly, to join the ranks of the Nim. Geth, Lord of the Vault. So, looking for some fodder for their zombie horde. Necrogen Scudder. 3/3 flying for 3. When Necrogen Scudder enters the battlefield, you lose 3 life. Contrary to popular belief, it's kept aloft by Necrogen gas, not the screaming agony of 1,000 murdered souls. I do recall that seeing play once in a while. Next, we've got a Necrotic Ooze, a 4/3 for 4. As long as Necrotic Ooze is on the battlefield, it has all activated abilities of all creature cards in all graveyards. Again, I think there's some combos you can do with that, but they're pretty niche. Geth, Lord of the Vault. Death to death all must go, and so in death lies ultimate power. Next, we've got Painful Quandary. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, that player loses 5 life unless he or she discards a card. So, again, it's an enchantment which doesn't do anything immediately, but each time your opponent casts a spell, they've got a choice to make. For each word spoken, one forgotten. For each thought, a memory rotten. The color sections in this set are somewhat smaller than most because the set is so heavily artifact focused. We've got a big artifact section coming up too. Here's a Painsmith, 2 cost, 2/1. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may have target creature get +2 attack and gain Death Touch until end of turn. The Moriok see the Artificer as a taskmaster, forcing lazy metal into more potent shapes. Another one that was fun in Infect decks, Plague Stinger. Insect Horror, so good, works nicely with Swarmyard again. 2 for a 1/1 flying Infect. It leaves its victims 1 sting closer to Phyrexis. And Phyrexis,
Aaron, can you shut that window, please?
is the disease which they've come to explain in later stories was what the Dr. Yawgmoth was trying to find a cure for initially, and then came to think that it had more benefits in the end and started to use it. Target player discards a card. If a land card is discarded this way, return Psychic Miasma to its owner's hand. A mind may be steeled against madness, but all battlements fall in time. Gingitaxius, Core Augur. So, another name we should keep in mind. And then we've got Relic Putrescence. Enchant artifact. Whenever an enchanted artifact becomes tapped, its controller gets a poison counter. So, very much like some of the old enchantments that Black would get to make it painful for artifacts to be used, or just to have artifacts, and cursed artifact would just deal 1 each upkeep. Until we shed the curse of sentience, we must endure its grotesque handiwork. From Vornclicks. This guy was quite popular. Flametongue Kavu had been a game changer. A 4-drop for a decent body that could take out an opponent's creature at the same time, 2 for 1, very, very often. Skin Render was similar in some respects. It's only a 3/3 instead of a 4/2, but still a threat. Costs 4. A zombie is relevant in some cases as well because of the possibilities for interaction. And when it enters the battlefield, put 3 -1/-1 counters on target creature. That could take care of a lot of things. And even if it couldn't take care of something, it could still hobble it pretty nicely. Your creations are effective, Shieldred, but we must unite the flesh, not merely flay it. And that's from Elish Norn, another name to keep in mind. These Praetors keep popping up. Next, we have Skithrix the Blight Dragon. This was one of my favorite cards from this set, in terms of creatures at least. A skeleton dragon, legendary creature. It's quite nice. 4/4 flying for 5 is basically right along the lines with what I grew up with Singular Vampire. However, Infect is a much more brutal ability than the Singular ever had. To compensate that it's a legendary creature, it's got even more than that. You can pay a black to have it gain haste until end of turn. So if you're casting it a little later, you can swing in immediately if you see an opening. And you can pay 2 black to regenerate it even. So that can be quite bothersome to certain decks, I'll just say. I used to use this as a commander for a while. But then I found it was easier with when working with Infect to not have it out there as being advertised by your commanders what you're doing, but just have ways to make it a surprise every once in a while. So I think I moved Skithrix more commonly into my main body of my deck for commander. Tainted Strike is another way to surprise nicely. An instant target creature gets +1/+++1 attack, basically, and gains Infect until end of turn. So all of a sudden, that big swing you're making, if you can get 10 damage in one shot, that's lethal right there. Welcome to perfection, Shieldred, the Whispering One said. Handy little common in the right circumstances. Like I said, good for a surprise. I don't run it in my regular Infect decks, obviously. Arc Trail. 2 cost, deals 2 damage to target creature or player, and deals 1 damage to another target creature or player. You can always find a second target easily enough. Don't try to hit your enemies. Concentrate on the space between them and fill the air with doom. And again, this one is from Mirrodin faction. So you can see in black, there was only a handful of cards that weren't for exit. Assault Strobe, 1 red. Target creature gains double strike until end of turn. When breaking someone's face once just isn't enough. That, honestly, being a sorcery gums that card up a little bit too much, in my opinion. It can be effective in certain circumstances, but I never paid a whole lot of attention to it, to be honest. Barrage Ogre. Ooh, thanks for the guitar. This is a 3/3 for 5. You Ogre. Ogre. Tap it and sacrifice an artifact. Barrage Ogre deals 2 damage to target creature or player. It's a Mirrodin faction again. The elves had devised countless strategies to combat Memnarch's war machines, but they had no idea what to do when one was thrown at them. Just drop by before bed. Have a wonderful night, everyone. Well, thank you very much for dropping in. I appreciate that greatly. Blade Tribe Berserkers. 3/3 for 4. Metalcraft. When it enters the battlefield, if you control 3 or more artifacts, Blade Tribe Berserkers gets +3/+3 and gains haste until end of turn. So, a 6/6 haste could be a rather nasty surprise. Otherwise, it's basically just a Hell Giant. Here's another Bloodshot Trainee. 2/3 Goblin Warrior for 4. Tap it. It deals 4 damage to target creature. Activate this ability only if Bloodshot's Trainee's power is 4 or greater, so you got to train it up a bit first. Just think how strong I'll be if my arms don't tear off. If it could hit players as well as creatures, that would be, I think, much more worth the training process. Cerebral Eruption, 4 cost. Target opponent reveals the top card of his or her library. Cerebral Eruption deals damage equal to the revealed card's converted mana cost to that player and each creature he or she controls. If a land card is revealed this way, return Cerebral Eruption to its owner's hand. So, a little random for my tastes, unless you
found this on the web.
No.
Who wrote Eruption Forecast Appointment revealed the top of his Cerebral Eruption's
Shush.
damage.
Shush, silly Siri. Does anyone else have that problem? Or is it just unique to our house? I can't believe it's unique to our house. Anyway, here's an Embersmith. 2/1 for 2. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may pay 1. If you do, Embersmith deals 1 damage to target creature or player. Again, that's some good extra value to be able to spread some extra damage around, for sure. The Volshock see the Artificer as a catalyst, bringing the spark of creation that ignites change. And here we have a Ferrovore. 2/2 for 3. Pay a red and sacrifice an artifact to give it +3 attack until end of turn. The Volshock use Digestion to break down the most obstinate artifacts, from Darksteel Mirror to Sea Strider Plates. Next we have a Flameborn Hellion. 5/4 haste for 6. And it attacks each turn of Fable. The most reliable omen of a future Hellion attack is a past Hellion attack. Oops. Next we've got Furnace Celebration. Enchantment for 3. Whenever you sacrifice another permanent, you may pay 2. If you do, Furnace Celebration deals 2 damage to target creature or player. Reduce, reuse, wreak havoc. Again, being able to do that repeatedly and conditionally can certainly have its uses, but you really got to build around it to get the most out of it. Galvanic Blast here has been reprinted a few times. It's a pretty strong little removal spell. Baseline is Shock, 1 red instant, do 2 damage to target creature or player. That's not bad, but it's got the additional bonus of Metalcraft. Galvanic Blast deals 4 damage to that creature or player instead if you control 3 or more artifacts. That is much more handy. If you've got the artifacts around, one red to deal 4, quite impressive. Mirrodin has little weather, but it certainly has lightning. Next, we've got Goblin Cavalier. 1 red, 1/1 with trample, and it gets +2 attack for each equipment attached to it. So again, the more you buff it. When everything looks like a nail, you really need to get yourself a hammer. Now we're getting into a rare here, Horde Smelter Dragon. 6 for a 5/5 flying. You can pay 4, destroy target artifact, and Horde Smelter Dragon gets +X attack until end of turn, where X is the artifact's converted mana cost. He collects the precious metals and then converts the rest into propellant. Handy when you have lots of artifacts around. Pretty average when you don't. Honestly, 5/5 flying for 6s. Even then, when this card was printed, wasn't wonderful. Now, Koth here. This one I liked to use in a couple decks. Koth the Hammer. I think this was also reprinted in a dual deck. Koth the Hammer is 4 for Planeswalker. Again, the Planeswalkers don't necessarily have a faction, although they were usually helping out the Mirrans. Untap target mountain for +1. It becomes a 4/4 red elemental creature until end of turn, and it's still land. Using creatures as lands using lands as creatures has been a thing for a long time. It's only recently with earthbending that they decided to make it so that if it died, you got your land back. I think that was a mistake. I think it's a powerful ability, being able to use your lands to attack with, but there should be a drawback to it. -2 is add red to your mana pool for each mountain you control. So even that, with this guy, if he comes down late enough in the game, can be a major accelerant for you for some nasty stuff. Or -5, you get an emblem with mountains you control have tap. This land deals 1 damage to target creature or player. When you can tap with all your mountains to team with, yeah, that's strong. But yeah, even as a 4-drop, just to use the +1 and swing with a 4/4 that turn, is not that bad. It's fairly efficient, and it's got enough variety to it that it's a threat. People got to deal with Koth, or he's going to cause big trouble. Next, we've got another rare, the Kolduth Phoenix. 5 cost, 4/4 flying haste. Comes down swinging again. Metalcraft. You can pay 4 to return the Phoenix from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate only during your upkeep, and only if you control 3 or more artifacts. So, again, the Phoenix Resurrection motif coming back even cheaper than its casting cost. And again, having haste, you're swinging in right away. I used to like this. I never saw it played much, but it's a fun card for casual games. Kuldutha Rebirth, 1 red. As an additional cost to cast it, sacrifice an artifact and put 3 1/1 red goblin creature tokens onto the battlefield. Definitely could accelerate you in a goblin deck. All goblin rituals serve a dual purpose as fertility rites, even the destructive ones, especially the destructive ones. Next, we've got good old Melt Terrain. 4 cost, destroy target land. Definitely more expensive than a Stone Rain. So as a bonus, you get Melt Terrain deals 2 damage to that land's controller. Paying an extra 1 for an extra 2 damage. Honestly, if you're really trying to run land destruction as a main thing, I'd rather have the cheaper card most of the time, but just as the most finely wrought metal can warp and rust, so too does Mirrodin buckle under pressure from without and within. And again, Mirrodin faction. Next we got Molten Psyche. 3, each player shuffles the cards from his or her hand into his or her library, then draws that many cards. Metalcraft. If you control 3 or more artifacts, Molten Psyche deals damage to each opponent equal to the number of cards that player has drawn this turn. And we've got an Ogre Gear Grabber. 6 for a 4/4. When it attacks, gain control of target equipment an opponent controls until end of turn. Attach it to Ogre Gear Grabber. When you lose control of that equipment, unattach it. Long reach, short attention span. And we've got the Oxidia Daredevil. He's having fun. 2 mana for a 2/1. Sacrifice an artifact. Oxidia Daredevil gains haste until end of turn. His goggles splattered with grime. His mouth full of bugs. He tossed the engines another priceless relic. This, sadly, reminds me a little too much of Aether Drift. I hope this wasn't one of their inspirations. But there you go. Aether Drift is a recent set that was racing themed. A lot of creatures and vehicles riding around in circles. Anyway, Oxidia Scrap Melter. 3/3 for a 4. And when it enters the battlefield, destroy target artifact. So again, it can be a 2-for-1. Not bad if you're convinced there's going to be enough artifact targets around to destroy. But pretty narrow. I wouldn't run it unless you know that you're in an artifact-heavy metagame. It subsists on a diet rich in screaming metal and molten blood. I have run it, though. It's not... Definitely could do worse. Scoria Elemental. 5 for 6/1. A single molten cord links it to the subterranean furnace, as drawing heat and metal from beneath Kuldutha. Until that bond is cut, it carves a swath of raw destruction. I can read. Anyway. Next, we're back to an oldie but a goodie. All the way from Alpha, we've got Shatter, which, again, in an artifact-heavy set, you're not going to find a better place for it. 2 mana is an instant destroy target artifact. I am an artist, a builder, a creator. I create the biggest explosions around. And then Spike Shot Elder. I've thrown this guy into Goblin decks several times. 1/1 for 1, like a lot of goblins. You can pay 3. Spike Shot Elder deals damage equal to its power to target creature or player. So some direct damage when you need it, although it's a little bit expensive. It depends on how much you can buff it. Now that he knows 1,000 ways of hurting people, his next shamanic quest is to discover 1,000 more. Not bad if you got, even just a Goblin King or Goblin Warlord or whatever around to give it +1/+1. Paying 3 to do 2 to any target once you've run out of goblins to drop is usually quite handy. Then we've got your Tunnel Ingus. 2/1 for 2. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under opponent's control, if that player had another land enter the battlefield under his or her control this turn, Grinning Angus deals 3 damage to that player. So this is a way to slow down all those land drop decks. Shoot, the word escapes me. But even fetch lands and stuff will hurt under this thing. Fight mischief with mischief. Next, we've got Turn to Slag. 5 cost, deals 5 damage to target creature. Destroy all equipment attached to that creature. If it wasn't a blackened, stinking, melted abomination before, it clearly is now. Next, we've got a Volshock Heart Stroker. 3 mana, 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, target creature gets +2 attack until end of turn. He fashions stirring words with as much passion as a smith fashioning a warhammer. And that's our last red card. And as you've seen, every single red card, other than Koth, who didn't have a symbol, was Mirrodin associated. So no Phyrexians there either, just like white. Acid Web Spider. It's got reach for a 5/3 for 5. And when it enters the battlefield, you may destroy target equipment. Its web is an excellent source of found copper for the darning or the stupid. Sorry, for the daring or the stupid. Honestly, even against an equipment deck, I find that's a little bit too expensive to be reliable. We got a good old Alpha Tyrannax. Again, they didn't want to deviate too far from the standard Crawworm, but you get a 6/5 instead of a 6/4 for your vanilla 6-drop green big common. Hunger seized the Tyrannax, and the Silvok Vision quest ended in disaster. Next we have an Asceticism. Enchantment for 5. Creatures you control can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control. And you can pay 2 to regenerate target creature. Handy, but again, it doesn't give you an immediate advantage. It just protects your creatures for 5. Let my ignominy build walls thicker than iron and stronger than dark steel. Thron the Last Troll. Then we've got a Bellowing Tangleworm. 4/4 for 5. Intimidate. Other green creatures you control have Intimidate. Nice to spread the words. The ability around, although 4/4 for 5 is not that great. Blight Mamba. I used to like this guy. 1/1 Infect for 2, and it can regenerate. Its venom drips with Phyrexia's hate. Quite annoying. Handy for a blocker, because it also shrinks and then regenerates from whatever it blocked. Anyway, Whips. 4 mana instant. You gain 1 life for each creature on the battlefield. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. So again, blunt the assault. Again, for a fog effect. The extra life gain probably isn't worth the extra 3 mana. Much can be gained from the appearance of vulnerability. Missouri Renegade Leader. Trying to sneak people. Make some tactical decisions here. Now, Carapace Forger. Metalcraft. Carapace Forger gets +2/+2 as long as you control 3 or more artifacts. Starts out as a 2/2 for 2. Bows, whips. Bows and whips cannot save us from these new horrors of Mephedros. Elf Artificer. Next we have a Carrion Caller. Or Carrion Call. 4 mana. Put 2 1/1 green insect creature tokens with infect onto the battlefield. Natural Order is out of order. Little expensive, but multiple bodies with infect can be handy. Copperhorn Scout. 1 mana, 1/1. Whenever it attacks, untap each other creature you control. Handy with certain abilities. Fergan's Spur may sound louder, but Viridian Resurgence claim that the horn of the Vorak creates a truer, more inspiring note. Next we have Assist Bearer. Beast. 2/3 with infect. For 3. Phyrexia strives to simulate natural life, but it can't resist improving on the design. Next we have Engulfing Slagworm. So 7/7 for 7. When it blocks or becomes blocked by a creature, destroy that creature. You gain life equal to the creature's toughness. Its teeth exist only for decoration. Straight down the gullet. Next we have one we saw a quote from, Missouri Renegade Leader. 2/2 for 3. You can pay a green to regenerate another elf, and you can pay 3 green and 2, 5 total. Elf creatures you control get +3/+3 and gain trample until end of turn. So basically, not only can you regenerate other elves, you can also cause an overrun. The infamous Azuri commands the highest bounty the Vatican have ever placed upon an outlaw. And we've got Azuri's Archers. 1 green mana for a 1/2 reach. And when it blocks a creature with flying, it gets +3 attack until end of turn. So if it's actually blocking a flying creature with its reach ability, it's a 4/2 for 1. And we've got Azuri's Brigade. Ooh, excuse me. 4/4. As long as you control 3 or more artifacts, it gets +4/+4 and has trample, so it turns into an 8/8 trample. Riding ravenous, ever-growing Vorax is almost as dangerous as fitting them with saddles. Honestly, if you can get a Force of Nature 8/8 trample out of this thing for 4 mana without having to worry about paying the upkeep, it's wasn't a bad little beater. And then we have Genesis Wave. 3 green and X. Reveal the top X cards of your library. You may put any number of permanent cards with converted mana cost X or less from among them onto the battlefield. Then put all cards revealed this way that weren't put onto the battlefield into your graveyard. If you can get that going, that could definitely do a lot of stuff. Next we have a Liege of the Tangle. 8 cost, 8/8 trample. When Leisure the Tangle deals combat damage to a player, you may choose any number of target lands your opponent any number of target lands you control, and put an awakening counter on each of them. Each of those lands is an 8/8 green elemental creature token for as long as it has an awakening counter on it. They're still lands. Yeah. So 8/8 trample. It's just got to get 1 damage through, and then all those lands get big. And then we've got our Life Smith. 2/1 for 2, like the other Smiths. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may pay 1 if you do gain 3 life. That's definitely one of the weak ones. Again, life gaining is just generally not the strongest ability. There are ways to get better use out of it. Molder Beast. 5 for a 5/3 trample. Into a graveyard. From the battlefield, Molder Beast gets +2 attack until end of turn. A trail of scrap metal can lead it into an ambush, but take care not to overfeed it. And then we've got Putrefax, one of the stronger infect creatures in terms of size. 5 for a 5/3 trample haste. So again, haste significant, could come down swinging with infect. At the beginning of the end step, sacrifice Putrefax. So if it goes unblocked, that's half the poison counters needed to wipe out an opponent. If it is blocked, it might still trample over a little bit. But yeah, the fact that it's attacking for half the poison needed to finish somebody, I'm not surprised they didn't let you keep it around. Slice in Twain. Instant for 4, destroy target artifact or enchantment, and draw a card. So again, just a bonus on a naturalize, basically. They double the cost, but let you draw a card. The hypocrisy of these elves is thicker than steel, destroying unnatural metal with their own enchanted swords. Then we've got a Tangle Angler. 4 cost, 1/5 infect, and you can pay a green target creature blocks Tangle Angler this turn if able. So, Plague on the Curious. Next, we have Tel Gilad Defiance. 2 for an instant, target creature gains protection from artifacts until end of turn and draw a card. The Mirrodin elves had purged their culture of the troll's traitorous influence. In times of strife, however, the ancestral memories returned. Again, exploring some of that history. Now, here's where things take a dark turn. Honestly, green has always been an interesting color on Mirrodin because I just find the aesthetic, like, green is supposed to be natural. Everything on Mirrodin is made of metal. So if you notice when we looked at the forests earlier, the designs are different. They're not very forest-like. And I think some of that rubbed off on even the elves and things. The elves in Mirrodin are much darker than they are in a lot of other planes. There are some planes, like there's always been elves with deep shadow and elves that had a darker side to them, but this one's definitely part of that group. 4 cost, protection from artifacts, which again, very relevant in this set, for a 3/1 infect. No longer am I shackled to antiquity. My new masters will etch a glorious future. So the elves were starting to turn to Phyrexia. And later on, we'll see it gets worse. Untamed Might, a green and X. Target creature gets +X/+X until end of turn. Beasts kill for their very survival. If you would have their strength, you must know their desperation. And then, final one here is the Viridian Revel. 3-cost enchantment. Whenever an artifact is put into an opponent's graveyard from the battlefield, you may draw a card. That can be very handy against artifact-heavy decks. Let them have their revel. Soon those who won't submit will be turned. Those who won't be turned will die. Vorinclex, Voice of Hunger, is another one of the Praetors. We've got Wing Puncture, 1 green. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature with flying. If I were the heir, I wouldn't taunt the ground. It has the weight advantage. And our final green card of the set is Withstand Death. 1 green, target creature is indestructible this turn. On Mirrodin, every conflict ends in either death or dark steel. And next we have our third Planeswalker, Vesner the Sojourner. I used to like this one. It's not as powerful as some, being 2 colors and 5 mana is a lot to ask up front. And it's got a +2. It only starts with 3 loyalty. Target permanent you exile, target permanent you own, return to the battlefield under your control at the beginning of the next end step. You know, again, anything with enters the battlefield or leaves the battlefield triggers, you can get some extra value with this, but that's +2. -1, creatures are unblockable this turn. There can be situations where that's very handy. And -8 if you ever get it up that high without, I guess you can proliferate to help out. You get an emblem with whenever you cast a spell, exile target permanent. That's pretty vicious ability, to be honest. And that was the only multicolor card in the set. Keep in mind, multicolors were, for years, only special multicolor sets had a lot of multicolors. Otherwise, they were pretty sparse. Now they're all over the place in every set at every rarity level. It's a little ridiculous in my opinion. Quarters Shield. Freebie, free artifact. Equipped creature gets +0/+3 and vigilance equipped for 3. An auric shield is polished to a mirror finish, even on the inside, enabling its bearer to watch foes ahead and behind. Not the strongest equipment, but being a 0-cost artifact, could still be quite handy with things like Glinthawk. Now here's Argentum Armor. 6 cost, +6/+6 to the equipped creature, and whenever that creature attacks, destroy target permanent. This reminds me of the, Ultima weapon from Final Fantasy? Similar in some respects, costs 6 to equip, which is nasty, but there are ways to bring in equipment and just straight up attach them to things. That's what you basically want to do with this. Mirrodin's creator still lives, still shapes metal, and still commands world-shaking power. So again, there's a reference to Karn. Karn, who after the war went and built for himself Mirrodin, a world. And once he got the inhabitants going, he went and left it. He was shocked to discover what was going on in this block when he came back. Auriok Replica. 2/2 for 3. Pay a white, sacrifice it, prevent all damage a source of your choice would deal to you this turn. All the loyalty of the Auriok with only a trace of their self-righteousness. Next we have, it's a little too far away, unfortunately, Barbed Battle Gear. 3 cost. Equipped creature gets +4, -1, and equips for 2. Definitely not one of my favorites, but in the right circumstance can be useful. One need only look at the inhabitants of this world to see they are forged halfway to perfection. All they need is a whisper of the glorious word, Umbrask the Hidden. Another praetor. I think we've heard quotes from all of them now. Bladed Pinions, 2 cost, equipped for 2. Equipped creature has flying and first strike. Lacking trained patrons, the Auric had to rely on other measures to gain the upper hand in the skies. And I've got a foil one there too. I don't have a lot of foils. I opened a few boxes of this set, but Chimeric Mass X enters the battlefield with X charge counters on it. Pay 1 until end of turn. Chimeric Mass becomes a construct artifact creature with this creature's power and toughness are each equal to the number of charge counters on it. So again, with a little setup could be handy, but generally there are more efficient ways if you want an artifact creature body or a artifact or land which can animate into a creature at need. Chrome Steed, this one is handy. Metalcraft, Chrome Steed gets +2/+2 as long as you control 3 or more artifacts. It's a straight up 4/4 for 4 under that condition. According to the Auriok myth, it collects scraps in order to reassemble their lost burrow. I think I blinked there for a second. I must. According to the Auriok myth, it collects scrap in order to reassemble its lost rider. Then we got the Clone Shell. I remember using the Chrome Steed. I don't remember it being... I must be getting it mixed up. Oh, I'm thinking with the Corpse Cur, I think. That's coming up yet. Clone Shell, 5 cost for 2/2 imprint. When Clone Shell enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library. Exile 1 face down, then put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. When Clone Shell is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, turn the exiled card face up. If it's a creature card, put it onto the battlefield under your control. This is interesting because it lets you cheat in to play a creature if it dies, and there are ways to engineer that, of course. It's pretty rare that you can do that. It's a lot of work around, but there are some creatures that are worth tricking into play, obviously. Contagion Clasp, this was a favorite. As an uncommon, is a cheap way to gain access to a repeatable proliferate effect, and when it comes into the battlefield, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. That is some immediate upfront upside as well. So this used to be a favorite with my brother and I and people who used to like to get some Contagion action going in a hurry. Contagion Engine, much more expensive at 6, also gives you some serious proliferate action, though. When it enters the battlefield, put a -1/-1 counter on each creature target player controls. So much more serious version of the Contagion Clasp. And again, pay 4 and tap it, but this time proliferate and then proliferate again. So this one gives you, for triple the cost to play, it gives you a wider effect of -1/-1 counters and double the effect of the proliferation when you're paying 4, which is a lot to do, especially if you're doing it multiple turns in a row. I like that card. Sorry, I missed what you said when you said that one, but the proliferating mechanics certainly can be quite powerful if that was as recent as I think it is. Copper Mirror. Now, there's one of these for each color. 2/2, or sorry, a 1/1 4/2, and taps for a green mana. The mirror are like verdigris, an ever-present patina on the surface of a metal world. And the mirror were very common in the first Mirrodin block as well. And you can see with these artifacts, these are again similar to blue, and I suppose red to a certain extent in this set. A mix of the Phyrexian and Mirrodin factions. Corpse Cur 2/2 for 4. Infect. So I used to run it in Infect X, obviously. When Corpse Cur enters the battlefield, you may return target creature card with Infect from your graveyard to your hand. So it could also get you another card back or another creature back that died earlier. There's several that are cheaper than 4. So a little extra advantage there. They were quite handy. Culling Deus. Sacrifice a creature, put a charge counter on Culling Deus. And then pay 1, sacrifice Culling Deus, draw a card for each charge counter on Culling Deus. Very slow, gotta sacrifice a lot of creatures. In some cases where you've got tokens around, yeah, it could be alright, but not a huge fan of this one in my opinion. And again, just get it started and you could get it going if you've got proliferate also going around. Forswear the flesh, and you will truly see. Jin-Gitaxias Core Augur. Again, the Praetor, I believe, for blue. Then we've got Dark Steel Axe. Nice to see. Throwback to Dark Steel, the second set of Mirrodin block, specifically. Dark Steel Axe is indestructible. Equipped creature gets +2 attack. Costs 1 to play, 2 to equip. Heavier than it looks and trickier to wield. Guaranteed to last. Now, this is basically a takeoff on the old Bone Splitter, which is an early equipment from Mirrodin, which just seemed to be a little too strong. Basically, it was +2/+0, and it cost 1 to play and 1 to equip. Very efficient, similar to Rancor in some ways, and then it stayed around, and you could just buff whatever creature you had coming out. And this one costs a little more to equip, but it's indestructible. Sorry. I did always appreciate Darksteel stuff back when I was little, and some of it is still pretty good. Darksteel Juggernaut is a 5-cost star. Its power and toughness are each equal to the number of artifacts you control, and it's indestructible and attacks each turn if able. So it can cause some damage, but at the same time, it's not a huge threat unless you really build around it. 1 part unstoppable force, 1 part immovable object. And then we've got Darksteel Mirror. This one's interesting. It's indestructible, but it's a 0/1 for 3. So I think the idea with that one is mainly to just be a defensive wall to slow down whatever your opponent's best attacker is. Darksteel Sentinel, 6 cost, 3/3, flash, vigilance, and indestructible. So it's handy. I do remember playing with Darksteel Gargoyles at one point, which are indestructible. Indestructible creatures always tend to be way overcosted, because otherwise you just get a couple onto the battlefield and then play a big board wipe, and your creatures hang around and your opponents don't. It's major swingage. Then we've got an Echo Circlet. 2 cost. Equipped creature can block an additional creature. It costs 1 to equip. After the vanishing of the Elder Generations, the Anvil tribe developed creative solutions to their personnel shortages. We've got an Etched Champion. Used to be popular. I think it's fallen off. There's just better options these days. But 3 mana, 2/2. And with Metalcraft, Etched Champion has protection from all colors as long as you control 3 or more artifacts. And it, of course, itself is 1, so it gets you partway there itself. Its predecessors were etched with the wisdom of ancients. Its own etchings bear warnings of a future fraught with war. So protection from all colors will protect it from a lot of removal spells. It'll make it hard to block. It covers a lot of bases, but it's not perfect. It's not, and it's somewhat conditional. So, Flight Spell Bomb costs 1. You can tap and sacrifice it. Target creature gains flying until end of turn, just like the instant that I could hold in my hand until I wanted to do that. And when Flight Spell Bomb is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you may pay a blue. If you do, draw a card. So all these spell bombs, I think, have that clause for different colors. Idle. Whenever another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you may have Glinthawk Idle become a 2/2 flyer artifact creature with flying until end of turn. So, yeah, again, having artifacts that you can transform at will into creatures is handy. They also avoid sorcerer speed board wipes in general. And 2/2 flyer is a handy, excuse me, little body to have. I used to use that occasionally, not as much as the original Glinthawk, but all right. Starting to get into some of the more spicy stuff on this set of pages. Gold Mirror. Again, I think this is a reprint from the original Mirrodin. You get your 1/1 for 2, and it taps for white in this case. The mirror are like razor grass, numberless metal figures reflecting each other's light. I do like these foils. And then we've got Golden Urn. Costs 1. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may put a charge counter on Golden Urn, and you can tap and sacrifice it. You gain life equal to the number of charge counters on Golden Urn. Unless you've got reasons to be having artifacts come into play and charge counters floating around, the payoff for gaining a few life is generally not worth it, in my opinion. Golden Artisan. These days you can combo just about anything, though. 5 for a 3/3. Pay 2, target artifact creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Pay 2, target artifact creature gains your choice of flying, trample, or haste until end of turn. So, yeah. Those extra abilities to pump things or give out strategic abilities can be handy. But, again, a lot of mana. Golem Foundry. 3 cost. Whenever you cast an instant spell, you may put a charge counter on Golem Foundry. Remove 3 charge counters from the Foundry to put a 3/3 colorless Golem artifact creature token onto the battlefield. So yeah. Again, it's just a little too hard to charge up generally unless you've really built your deck around it with Proliferate or other things. Golem's Heart. 2 cost. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may gain 1 life. Whenever a player casts an Again, these little life gain trinkets, there have been lots of things similar over the years. They're never usually the best play unless you can get some other value out of them. Heart of a Golem gives life to more than just the iron husks around it. And then we got a Phyrexian equipment. Grafted Exoskeleton. 4 cost, equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has Infect. And when it becomes unattached from a permanent, sacrifice that permanent. Trying to unattach something grafted is always tricky for sure. It costs 2 to equip. But technically, again, a way to give Infect to other things you like. Then we've got a Grind Clock, 2 cost artifact. Tap it to put a charge counter on Grind Clock, or tap it, target player puts the top X cards from his or her library onto his or her graveyard, where X is the number of charge counters on Grind Clock. Okay, so it's basically a slower, clunkier sort of Millstone variant that doesn't need mana. I mean, there's ways to make use of such cards, but I don't know if this is really the best option for it. Then we've got the Heavy Arbelist. So 3 cost. Equipped creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. Equipped creature has tap. This creature deals 2 damage to target creature or player. And 4, so you can move it around, but mana is expensive to do so. And basically, your creatures are getting 1 per turn unless you got another way to untap them. We got a Horizon Spellbomb, 1 to cast. Pay 2, sacrifice Horizon Spellbomb, search your library for basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. And when it's put into a graveyard, you can pay a green to draw a card. I mean, mana ramp is one thing. Putting all these abilities on artifacts when there's other abilities around is usually not the best call in my opinion. Ichor Mirror, 2 cost for a 1/1 Infect. And whenever Ichor Mirror becomes blocked, it gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Which honestly, a 3/3 with Infect when blocking is going to mess something up one of these days. It's even enough to get around something like White Knight or Black Knight, 2/2 for a strike. Won't be able to block against that for long. Infiltrator Lens, 1 cost, 1 equip. Equipped creature becomes blocked by a creature, you may draw 2 cards. And Neurok species carry devices that let them look a few moments into the future, giving them an almost insurmountable advantage. And Neurok spies, I should say. Handy, I assume in some cases it is a nice little cheap equipment that could let you draw cards, but again, conditional on blocking, which is something your opponent has, is always frustrating. Here's the Iron Mirror, the one that taps for red. The mirror are like rusted metal, gleaming purposefully, hidden by a thin disguise of debris. And we've got Kuldutha Forge Master. 3/5 for 5. Sacrifice 3 artifacts by tapping it and search your library for an artifact card then put that onto the battlefield and shuffle your library. So, again, you gotta have a plan with this thing. But being able to trick an artifact card onto the battlefield can be pretty brutal. We've seen the Darksteel and Blightsteel Colossuses in the past. There's a new one out there like Krang, who could be of great effect with something like this. But even combo pieces. You just got to make sure you've got the tokens out there or other creatures, artifact creatures to sacrifice. Or artifacts, I suppose, not just creatures. These days, that's a lot easier to do with all the food tokens, clue tokens, treasure tokens that are around, but you're still dealing with a creature to do this, which itself is an artifact creature and fairly easily removed while it's, waiting to use its ability. Lead mirror taps for black. Mirror are like Necrogen. Transformative. Force unconcerned with the changes they wreak. Still there. And then this one, very handy with Metalcraft. And for a few other triggers. Liquid metal coating. 2 cost, and just tap it. Target permanent becomes an artifact in addition to its other types until end of turn. Again, handy for Metalcraft, handy for activating certain abilities, also handy if you've got a lot of artifact removal in your deck to make anything, something you can blow up. They'll soon become accustomed to wearing skin that is not their own. That seems like a very Elish Norn thing to say. Then we've got Livewire Lash. 2 cost, 2 to equip. Equipped creature gets +2 attack and has whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell. This creature deals 2 damage to target creature or player. A little extra security there. If they try to get rid of it, they'll probably end up having to take some extra damage to a target of your choice. Then we've got the Lux Cannon. Not great, never was very popular, just too much required, but a strong effect nevertheless. 4 to cast. You can tap to put a charge counter on it. Tap it to remove 3 charge counters, so you gotta wait a long time unless you've got ways to increase the counter deployment. Lux Cannon, destroy target permanent, so basically just to get to pick something to blow up. Remember when we did the Darksteel set, we had, was it not Galvanizer? What was it? The mirror that when it comes into play, you get to mess with charge counters, or you can sacrifice it to add 2 more charge counters. Things like that. There are ways to speed this stuff up, aside from proliferate. There are a few problems that can't be solved by putting a hole in the world. Now we're getting into some interesting pieces. Honestly, this set and this whole block had a lot of really neat iterative and some creative ideas that were quite strong. Memnite here. There have been lots of 0-cost creatures. I mean, from the Kobolds, which were 0/1 red creatures. More impressively and iconically, Ornithopter, which was a 0/2 flyer for 0. This one is unique in that it actually gives you a creature with base power. So you can swing in with this. Also being 0, again, replayable with the Glinthawk very easily. Shield Sphere couldn't attack at all. It was a defender and it shrunk over time. Phyrexian Walker, another Phyrexian card earlier on, was a 0/3 for your 0 mana, but didn't fly like the Ornithopter. Honestly, I would say I would put Memnite right up there with Ornithopter for the top 2. Again, depends a little on the context. Mimic Vat can be fun. Whenever a non-token creature is put into a graveyard from the battlefield. You may exile that card. If you do, return each other card exiled with Mimic Vast to its owner's graveyard. And you can tap it to put a token on the battlefield as a copy of the exiled card. It gains haste. Exile it at the beginning of the end step. So, again, if you got this hanging out there and all of a sudden some interesting creature goes to the bin, you can start churning out copies of it. That's very situational, but potentially it's got a lot of power. Now here's another interesting reprint from back in Mirrodin block, the Mindslaver. 6 to cast, 4 to activate, but doesn't come into play tapped or anything like that. So you can actually, if you have a lot of mana available, get this whole thing cycling turn after turn. Yeah, pay 4, tap, and sacrifice it. You control target player during that player's next turn. So there's a lot you can do with that. Being able to make all their choices for them. It's a helm that leaves the head as at its most vulnerable. This card was very scary when it first came out. Less scary later on, but there are ways to abuse it for sure. And it was neat to see it get a reprint at the time. Molten Tail Masticore. The original Masticore back in Arcadian Masks was very powerful with very real downsides. They've never really gotten that level of popularity or power since then. 4 cost, 4/4 isn't as great a rate as it used to be. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice it unless you discard a card, so having to discard a card every turn. Major headache. Pay 4, exile a creature card from your graveyard. Molten Tail Masticore deals 4 damage to target creature or player. This is more expensive. The other one had smaller increments, so you could spread it around more easily. And pay 2 to regenerate it. Ooh. Then you've got Moriok Replica. Pay 2, sacrifice it, you draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. As a 2/2 for 3. All the secrets of the Mirrodin with only a trace of their corruption. And then probably the chase card of the set, I think. This one's really gone up lately. Mox Opal is one of the better Mox variants that they've come out with over the years, since the original 5 obviously were a little nuts. They came out with other things that were similar, like Jeweled Amulet. Yeah, it is probably the more valuable card in the set. This one is non-foil. I was glad to get one back when I was opening these. And I would run this in my vintage deck alongside Mox Diamond, alongside, you know, my power cards, the Tolarian Academy. It's fairly easy to get Metalcraft going with, Sol Ring and Mana Vault and Mana Crypt and all these things kicking around to accelerate your source. Tap for a mana of any color is very handy. The fact that you do need some other permanents to get it going is a drawback. But not having to discard a card like you did with Chrome Mox or Mox Diamond is certainly nice too. You can always just throw it out and eventually it'll start doing stuff for you. Very strong card. I do appreciate it. I wish I had a couple spare copies, to be honest. But I don't, and I'm happy to have the one. Most of the cards, I don't know. I like the variety. And like I said, I think Mox Opal is probably right up there. I would put it with Mox Diamond as being sort of the 2 best Moxes since the original wave. I don't think they've really surpassed those 2. Chrome Mox is nice, but having to give up a non-land card and only being able to get mana of the color of the card you imprint on it is a bit of a pain. So I'd rank that one a little lower than these other two, but it is a nice one. The sons of Mirrodin have shone upon perfection only once. And then we've got the Mirror Battlesphere. This one did see some play early on. It's been since long surpassed this effective, but 7 cost for a 4/7. When the Battlesphere enters the battlefield, put 4 colorless 1/1 mirror artifact creature tokens onto the battlefield, so it does give you an instant little army. Whenever a Mirror Battlesphere attacks, you may tap X untapped mirror you control. If you do, the Battlesphere gets plus X attack until end of turn. To do Battlesphere attacks, you may tap X untap mirror you control. If you do, Mirror Battlesphere gets plus X attack until end of turn and deals X damage to defending player. So yeah, it does get sort of the double effect for damage with the other tokens, and if you're playing a mirror deck with a lot of mirror tokens and stuff, this certainly can be an effective swinger. However, there are generally better ones out there these days. However, it does put you 5 bodies on the board for your 7 mana, which is a nice benefit. Not a lot of other creatures do that just on their own. Next, we've got Mirror Galvanizer. Speaking of mirror decks, there's a Lord for it. 2/2 for 3. Other mirror creature tokens you control get plus... not tokens. Other mirror creatures you control, whether they're tokens or not, get +1/+1. And you can pay 1 and tap it to untap each other mirror you control. So if you've got a bunch, this can amplify their mana generation or other abilities quite nicely. Then we've got the Mirror Propagator. 1/1 for 3, and you can pay 3 and tap it to put a token that's a copy of Mirror Propagator onto the battlefield. So if you got the extra mana, you can then be copying from this and that. We will ingest and remake this world in our image, not unlike some admirable designs I have seen here from Vornclicks. Again, the Phyrexians' mentality is about they're trying to perfect things through their own improvements. Not unlike the Borg, often using mechanical elements along with biological. Mirror Reservoir costs 3. Tap it for 2 mana to your mana pool. Spend this ability only to cast mirror spells or activated abilities of mirror. And pay 3 and tap it. Return target mirror card from your graveyard to your hand. So, again, useful in a mirror deck, but that's basically what it's designed for. A mana well as bottomless as the mirror are tireless. Problem with the mirror decks, again, they tend to be a little clunky, and you always have things kicking around like Shatterstorm, which will do a number on them. Necrogen Sensor, 3 cost. Necrogen Sensor enters the battlefield with 2 charge counters on it. Tap and remove a charge counter from Necrogen Sensor. Target player loses 2 life. Yeah, again, it's interesting, but you really need a way to keep adding counters to really get the value out of it, and even then it takes time. Moriok, Necromancers actively spread muted Necrogen, encouraging the transformation from Mirren to Nim. Then we got another Infect Insect to go with Swarmyard. 2 cost, 1/1. Infect, and when it is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you may put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. Again, nice little bonus for the Necropede. But again, as you'll see with most of these infect creatures, they tend to be fairly small. Murok Replica, 3 cost for a 1/4, and you can pay 2 and sacrifice it to return target creature card to its owner's hand. All the curiosity of the Murok with only a trace of their duplicity. I don't know. These, they did see play. They're basically just generic little artifact creature bodies with the added ability to sacrifice for extra effects. Some of the effects were stronger than others, but yeah, it varied. And again, with the spell bombs, sometimes you wanted something just to get more artifacts in play and sacrificed and all the rest, and they could generally do a job of that, but exile all cards from target player's graveyard. If the graveyard hate card, that could be handy, and you can draw a card with it. So, vanilla spellbomb. Nim Death Mantle is an equipment for 2. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has Intimidate, and is a black zombie. Whenever a non-token creature is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you may pay 4. If you do, return that card to the battlefield and attach the Death Mantle to it. Or otherwise, it just equips for 4. Next. In some ways, this one was one of the more interesting ones. The Origin Spell Bomb, 1 to cost, 1 to tap and sacrifice. Put a 1/1 colorless mirror artifact creature token on the battlefield. So you get a 1/1 for your 1 to play and 1 to tap and sacrifice. And when it is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you may pay a white if you do draw a card. So it can give you a token and draw a card for your 3 mana, basically. Doesn't the first one can be paid up front. Then we've got a Palladium Mirror, 2/2 for 3, and it taps for 2 colorless. Mirror are like the Glimmer Void, blank canvases on which to build grand creations. Mirror were always neat little mana rock creatures, or mana dorks, or whatever you want to call them. Not ever high end, but certainly consistent. 1 mana for the Panic Spellbomb. Target creature can't block this turn. Yeah, that wasn't one of the better ones. Again, given the right circumstances, it could be useful. And then again, paying a red when it goes to draw a card. Next, we've got the Perilous Mirror. 1/1 for 2. When it's put into a graveyard from the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to target creature or player. This is again another little one that likes to be sacked for extra value. To Mirrodin, an explosive. To Phyrexia, a missionary. Then we've got the Platinum Imperium. 8/8 for 8. Your life total can't change. You can't gain or lose life, can't pay any amount of life except 0. Ignore such insignificant forces as time, entropy, and death. So, I think this was meant to be sort of a corrected version or a more balanced version of the old Platinum Angel, which you can't lose the game and your opponent can't win. Costs 7 for a 4/4 flyer. It's got a bigger body on it, but a slightly less strong effect and costs a little more. Just interested in life total, which means a lot less in a set with Infect. Or, of course, you could still be decked. Still, I mean, it is a big beater and a bit of a threat that gives you some protection. So, not my favorite, but that's what it was. Precursor Golem, 5 for a 3/3. And when it enters the battlefield, put 2 3/3 colorless Golem artifact creature tokens onto the battlefield. So for your 5 mana, you get a total of 9 power of creatures, 2 3/3 tokens, and itself is a 3/3. Whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell that targets only a single golem, that player copies that spell for each other golem that spell could target. Each copy targets a different one of those golems. So, again, it does give you 9 mana in 9 power in 3 creatures for your 5, but if someone lightning bolts or disenchants or whatever one of the golems, the others all catch it as well, which is a little unfortunate to say the least. It had to have some downside though at that time with that sort of power level. Next, we got a prototype portal. 4 cost, imprint. You may exile an artifact card from your hand, pay X and tap it, put a token that's a copy of the exiled card onto the battlefield. X in the converted mana. X is the converted mana cost of that card. There are shenanigans you can do with this, but yeah, it takes the right type of build for that, and I never did one myself, so I can't speak to it too much. Ratchet Bomb here was very popular as a two cost way of dealing, especially with token creatures. You can tap it to put a charge counter on Ratchet Bomb, or tap and sacrifice Ratchet Bomb, destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost equal to the number of charge counters on Ratchet Bomb. So you could pay that and do it for 0 right away, and you destroy everything with cost 0, which would include most creature tokens. At that time, I think all creature tokens. It's only recently that they started specifying mana cost as a variable that you can put on your tokens. And, well, I guess you could do, it wouldn't necessarily work for tokens that are copies of specific creatures, like a Dance of Many Tokeners or the like. That would probably copy all the characteristics, but most, putting mirror tokens into play or goblin tokens into play, they usually all had 0 casting cost. And this would, I suppose, work against treasure tokens and food tokens and the like as well. So Ratchet Bomb was a thing for a while. It seems to have fallen out of popularity, or maybe just been reprinted to death. I'm not sure which, but I still think it's a handy card in certain situations. Then we've got a Razorfield Thresher. Just a 6/4 for 7. Artifact construct. Danger. Keep appendages clear of the front of machine, and rear of machine, and side of machine, and top of machine. Stand clear. Let's just keep it simple. Then we've got a Rust Tick. 1/3 for 3. You may choose not to untap. Rust Tick during your untap step. Pay 1 and tap it. Tap target artifact that doesn't untap during its controller's untap step for as long as Rust Tick remains tapped. Again, locking things down. Next, we've got a Rusted Relic. 4 cost artifact. Metalcraft. Rusted Relic is a 5/5 golem artifact creature as long as you control 3 or more artifacts. So it's a 5/5 with under Metalcraft and not a creature. So it's not the easiest thing to switch back and forth, but we consider Rust a curable disease. I have to puzzle over that one a little bit without having to completely remake the thing. Anyway, Saber Claw Golem, 5/5 for a 5 for a 4/2. You can pay a red to have it gain first strike until end of turn. The Warriors of Blade Tribe charged the Golem 20 strong. They returned numbering 10.5. Again, not huge impressive stats. Color dependent, but in a draft, there were times when you were just looking for another body. Semblance Anvil, 3 cost, rare, imprint. Exile a non-land card from your hand. Spells you cast that share a card type with the exiled card cost 2 less to cast. So it's a way to make all your spells of that type cheaper. Forged from what it forges. Then we've got the Silver Mirror. Interesting. Adds blue. The mirror are like Quicksilver, malleable in function and adaptable in form. Yeah, I still think it's kind of cute the way the silver mirror with Quicksilver for the blue, and the fact that Karn was a silver golem. But there's no direct parallel I can see there. It's just the closest parallel with all the other mirrors of that type. Snapsail Glider is a 2/2 for 3 and has flying with Metalcraft. Built from reconfigured Thresher. It charges with light reflecting off the golden plane, ready to take to the air in case of danger. And then we've got a Soliton. 5/5. Sorry, 3/4/4/5, and you can pay blue to untap Soliton. That can be worked into various combos. Again, just being able to pay to untap a creature and then tap it to do whatever with whatever combo you set up can be fairly strong. The Gemini engines had lost connection with each other and wandered apart, developing an independent awareness of their surroundings. There was a Gemini engine card earlier, as I recall. All right. Lots of artifacts, as I was mentioning before, so we're still not quite through, but we're getting to the last couple pages here, and there's some solid ones. Steel Hellkite, 6 for a 5/5 flyer. You can pay 2 to boost its power. Again, this is just a facsimile of a dragon. It's an artifact creature, mainly. And you can pay X to destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost X, whose controller was dealt combat damage by Steel Hellkite this turn. Activate this ability only once each turn. So that's what gives it a little bit of a threat, but being an artifact creature, they are easier to destroy than standard creatures, just because you can destroy them in any way a regular creature could, plus with artifact removal. Strata Scythe, 3 cost. Imprint. Search your library for a land card and exile it, then shuffle your library. And equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each land on the battlefield with the same name as the exiled card. Again, this could be quite handy in a monocolored deck, but it takes some setup. Equip for 3. Then we've got the Strider Harness. +1/+1 and has haste. Equip for 1. A little bit more to bring out. And certainly, +1/+1 is relevant, but In most cases, I'd just rather have Lightning Greaves. Each journey begins with a single step, and sometimes ends with that single step as well. Then, we've got the Sword of Body and Mind. Now, this is only the third sword of this and that was ever printed. The first two were both in dark steel. And those were Sword of Ice and Fire and Sword of Light and Shadow. So, when was dark steel printed? Back in... It came out in 2010. So, that was a good chunk of... what was it? Years, anyway. That there were just the two swords. Fire and Ice, Light and Shadow. That was it. In this block, every set of the three in Scars of Mirrodin, in Mirrodin Besieged, and in New Phyrexia, each of them got a new sword. All of them with protection from two colors, which are opposite each other. Not allied colors, but enemy colors on the color wheel. And this is the first Sword of Body and Mind. Generally not thought to be as strong as the original two, but it was neat that they finished out this cycle over this entire block. And then since then, they've made more, as I've discovered, for the allied colors. So this became quite a theme. Costs 3 to cast, 2 to equip. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from green and blue. Usually not the colors that are best known for removals. Those protections aren't as strong as they might be in themselves, but you also get a double ability whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player. Put a 2/2 green wolf creature token onto the battlefield. So, making tokens is something. And that player puts the top 10 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. That can be a double-edged sword. You're probably not going to outright deck somebody with this. And you might give them more tools if they're playing a Reanimator. So, like I said, not the strongest colors for protection. And the abilities are a little bit hit and miss. But, I mean, you get a token, you do some milling. It's not a bad card by any means. I just don't think it quite lived up to the original two that it was emulating. Then we've got a Silvok Life Staff. 1 cost, 1 to equip. Equipped creature gets +1 attack. And whenever it's put into a graveyard, you gain 3 life. The Druid's Life Staff connects her to the generations of bygone Silvok. Pretty basic, little common equipment. Not super powerful, but could be useful in the right deck. Silvok Replica. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. This is probably one of the more useful ones, especially in this format. So many artifacts around. Just having the option is nice. It only takes 1 green to trigger. All the zeal of the Silvok with only a trace of their conservancy. Then we got another Phyrexian one. The Throne of Geth. 2 cost. Tap, sacrifice an artifact to proliferate. Another way to proliferate regularly. But generally, paying mana is... this one doesn't give you the extra when you cast it, and sacrificing an artifact is usually a little harder to set up at the time this was made. Now it's much easier with all the, like I said, food tokens, treasure tokens, and clue tokens, and mutagen tokens, and things like that around that you can produce fairly easily. At the heart of Isha, Geth stokes dark fires of Phyrexia. Tower of Calamities. Again, there were several towers in the other one. Generally not great, but there you go. 4 cost, pay 8 and tap it, which is a lot. Tower of Calamities deals 12 damage to target creature. The Golems concealed one of their towers. out of fear that its power would be abused, and in anticipation of a time when its power would be sorely needed. Then, next 5 cards are all the Trigons. So you've got Trigon of Corruption, the black one, Phyrexian. 4 cost, they're all, well, no, they're not all 4 cost, I shouldn't say that. This one is 4 cost. Trigon of Corruption enters the battlefield with 3 charge counters on it. Pay 2 black and tap it, put a charge counter on it, and pay 2 other, tap and remove a charge counter from Trigon of Corruption to put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. Honestly, it's, other than the ability to recharge, which is just kind of clunky, I'd rather play Serrated Arrows. Next one is, again, the green. And green, interestingly, like I said before, has always seemed a little out of place on a metallic world. So I think that's why it tended to be easier to corrupt than some of the other colors, because it was already a bit of a stretch with all the metallic influence trying to be natural. Never quite panned out properly. And so I think that made it more, in my own headcanon, vulnerable to Phyrexian influence. Trigon of Infestation enters the battlefield with 3 charge counters on it. And again, you can put a charge counter. Pay 2, tap, remove a charge counter from Trigon of Infestation, put a 1/1 green insect creature token with an effect onto the battlefield. So again, tapping and paying 2 to get a 1/1 infect. That is more efficient than something like a Serpent Generator, which is the first thing I would compare it to. That costs 6, and you have to pay 4 and tap it. This one takes more charging beyond the first 3, but that slows it down, but not nearly as much mana. Trigon of Mending, 3 counters, able to charge. Remove a charge counter from Trigon of Mending. Target player gains 3 life. Again, just life gain for all this run around. Not the best, even if it does cost half the cost to deploy. Trigon of Rage. Remove a charge counter from Trigon of Rage. Target creature gets +3 attack until after. This one, I remember being one of the ones that saw some play. More than some of the others. In a very aggressive deck, being able to just add the extra bonus there for the 2 did sometimes see some use. And then Trigon of Thought for 5. And remove charge counter from Trigon of Thought to draw a card. 5 is a lot up front, but paying 2 and tap to draw a card does give it some legs for sure. This one I used to throw into a few of my decks. Little Tumble Magnet. Comes into the battlefield with 3 charge counters on it for 3. Tap and remove a charge counter from Tumble Magnet. Tap target artifact or creature. Being able to tap something like an Icy Manipulator is handy. This costs 1 less to play and 1 less to use. However, being limited to the first 3 activations, unless you can get more counters on it, is a little bit problematic, I'll grant, but still more efficient, generally speaking. And I always did like Icy Manipulator, which was around as far as they reprinted it again in Mirrodin block after it's it was in alpha and beta and unlimited. Then they pulled it from revised, put it back in Ice Age, and people were glad. It slowly became less powerful over time, but it did get reprints in later base sets, but it disappeared again until Mirrodin, and I'm not sure. I'm sure it's been printed again since then, but I remember that being sort of the main excitement that it was back, although it didn't pan out nearly as well in Mirrodin as it did in Ice Age. Vector Asp, 1 for a 1/1, and you can pay a black to give it infect until end of turn. And again, a snake. Phyrexia's machines take inspiration from nature, twisted, disturbing inspiration. That one's a little awkward because I don't like having to pay to give my creatures their abilities, but Vesner's Journal. 5 cost, you have no maximum hand size, so it's got a built-in Library of Lang. At least the main point of Library of Lang. There is a secondary effect anyway. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you gain 1 life for each card in your hand. So it encourages you to have a big hand in 2 ways. A Planeswalker's Chronicle spans worlds and civilizations, each page a lifetime. Honestly, though, for 5 to play, I don't remember anyone ever playing this. If they wanted that sort of effect, there are usually cheaper ways to get at it. The Volshock replica, pay 2 and sacrifice it. Volshock replica deals 3 damage to target player. Again, fairly aggressive, but outside of some experimentation, I don't remember seeing it a ton of play. Then we've got Wall of Tanglecord. 2 for a 6/6 defender, and it can gain reach until end of turn. Root-like fibers travel from Mirrodin's metallic forest, emerging from the crust to drink in the mana-infused sunlight. And again, just the metallic fibers trying to emulate trees was always a little awkward, even at the best of times. And the fact that the internal sparring between the factions caused more strife certainly didn't help. This is another one that was a lot of excitement at the time. At the time, Wurmcoil Engine gave you a decent amount of value for your 6 mana. 6/6 with Death Touch and Lifelink, so you usually gain some life off this, and it typically would kill something. And when Wurmcoil Engine is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put a 3/3 colorless worm artifact creature token with Death Touch and a 3/3 colorless artifact worm creature token with lifelink onto the battlefield. So when it dies, it splits in half. So instead of your 6/6 with Death Touch and lifelink, you get a 3/3 with Death Touch and a 3/3 with lifelink. Honestly, this thing was a pain to deal with effectively. And that is the last artifact. And then we're into the lands. We've already taken a look at the basic lands, but there's a whole cycle here of 2-color lands. Enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or fewer other lands. So, on the turns when it counts most, your first 3 land drops. This will enter untapped. Later in the game, after your 3rd land drop, these will enter tapped. Which is a pain, but at least they're there for the most important first couple turns of the game, where the Oxidia chain mingles with the Mephidros oil-suffused metal crumbles away, leaving walls of blackened bones. So, again, black-red, probably not most popular. This set had these in the 5 allied colors only. Copperline Gorge, where the tangle overruns the Oxidia Mountains, metallic beasts scratch their territories in the Verdigris. And Dark Slick Shores, where the Mephidros leaches into the Quicksilver Sea, the waves wreathe with necrogen. Then we've got a neat little addition. We got a Glimmer Post. Now, this was only the 2nd Locust ever printed. The first was from the original Mirrodin set. It was Cloud Post, and that was a popular card. Cloud Post had potential early on, but it was very hard to use because being the only locust, it came into play tapped every time and tapped for 1 mana for each locust you controlled. So if you got 2 or 3 early, it could accelerate your mana in a hurry. But with only 4 available in your deck, that was pretty hard. It really didn't take off at all until Time Spiral came out, and you had Vesuva, which could come in as a copy of any land. All of a sudden, you were up to 8 Cloud Posts in your deck. Much, much more regular that you could get 2 or 3 of them together. So you just had to play a regular Cloud Post first, was the trick there. And then, when we got Scars of Mirrodin, we got Glimmer Post, another locust. So now you could have 12 posts in your deck. Only the Cloud Post gave you the mana excel. This one wasn't nearly as good, but it did count as a locust. And when it comes into play, you can just tap for 1 at least. It doesn't come into play tapped, and it gains you 1 life for each locust on the battlefield. So they definitely played nice together. What once spied upon Mirrodin from above now waits below for another to assume control. I do like the post decks. Then we've got the Razor Verge Thicket. When the razor fields beat back the tangle, the crowded thickets yields to bright scimitars of grass. And so this is, again, like I said, mainly setting up the world, seeing how the infection and the Phyrexian influence is starting to creep in. Seachrome Coast, where the Quicksilver Sea laps over the razor fields, the landscape reflects the sun's fading hope. So these are quite nice. Now, from this point, we've already taken a look briefly at the lands here. They're just the different art on the basic lands, the Twisted Forests. We're going to hop into a bit of a break eventually. We're going to come back to this. This is part 1. We're going to do 3 parts where I look at the 3 sets. So we've already looked at the Scars of Mirrodin. Mirrodin Besieged follows that. These were the little rules and tips cards they included in each pack. Or at least in most of the packs, you could have gotten a token instead, I think. So they explain some of the new rules and elements here. Here's how Infect work. I'm not going to read this all to you. It's getting late. But I've got the complete set of ones here from Scars of Mirrodin and Mirrodin Besieged. And then probably the most interesting one from New Phyrexia, Metalcraft. Proliferate. Imprint. See, they're all numbered here at the bottom. And again, imprint wasn't a particularly new rule, but I kept it anyway. Rules tip for poison and emblems on the last one. And then we can pick it up and take a look at the other ones when we get into Mirrodin Besieged. But as you can tell from the name, the names of the sets, Mirrodin Besieged and New Phyrexia, the battle gets worse. I think someone was saying that they actually had some polling going on. When you came in for Mirrodin Besieged, you got to pick a faction deck. Did you want to be the Mirrans or the Phyrexians? And the battle definitely heats up there in the second set. So we'll take a look. We'll come back to this. But the one thing I love, like I said, set 1 was the biggest of the 3 in terms of card pool. This next sets, typically, when they did blocks, were smaller sets. They evened out the size a little bit for this one. This was a little bit later of a block of 3. But the storytelling elements are still there. And just seeing how the story evolved has always been a fascination for me. This block has some big changes in the fact of the life of an entire plane and the development of how the Phyrexians were seen and changed over time here. Let's flip this back so you can see my face again. And that a lot happened. When I was looking at a block that I used to collect to try and piece back together, it was between this one and the next runner-up was Innistrad block, which I had a fair chunk of. And this one just seems more interesting to me. Also, there's other things about Innistrad block that irritated me more. So but I went with this, and I'm not disappointed at all. There's a lot of interesting development of stories and mechanics in this set. A lot of strong cards. A lot of them have been reprinted or inspired things in the past. But I would say Scars of Mirrodin block is definitely one of the more fascinating. Sets were so much more easy to collect back then. The only more recent modern set that I've tried to collect is Lord of the Rings, and man, was it a pain. It still is a pain. I haven't finished it yet, but I'm getting closer, at least on the main series of cards. I'm not going to go for all the variants on everything, especially the hard to get, I'd love to get some more box toppers. I'm not going to try and get all the posters. I'm not going to try and get all the scroll borders. I'll just pick away a little bit. But with this set, you just had the main series of cards, no alternate arts. There were foils available, but, it was the same card, just the foiling. So this set, I really appreciate. And so I wanted to take a little extra time with it. And now that I got the set complete, at least, you'll see there's a couple of cards that I had to replace with newer versions just to get a copy. There's a couple of cards where I opted to grab the pre-release for the other latter 2 sets. Pre-releases were handled very differently then too, and I like the old date cards, so it's a bit of history into itself these days. But I hope you'll join me. I'm working nights the next week, so it's going to be 2 weeks before we can get to Scars of Mirrodin, and then we'll follow that up with New Phyrexia. And all the lovely characters that come out of this. There are still, you get the odd quotes from the different creators, but you don't actually see them yet. And their influence grows as the block goes on, for sure. So, yeah, I hope you join me for the rest of the block. I think it's an interesting one, and I have a lot of fun with it, going over some of these older sets. My memories of it at the time. I wasn't as active when I was collecting this one in terms of playing with friends and things, but I still was following the scene a little bit more closely in a way, and it was a very interesting time that was still very story driven in Magic's own stories, and not pulling in all the universes beyond stories. And I think there's a lot to be appreciated there. And I hope you agree with me. And I hope you have a good night. And again, hope you'll come back and join us for parts 2 and 3 in a couple weeks. Have a good night. Bye for now. How do Angela's asleep. I don't know how to turn this off. How do I end a stream? I think so. There we go. Have a good night, everybody. Bye.